Jacob White sat in the hospital room, watching his 8-year-old daughter Sophie sleep under the white sheets. Her face was pale, and her tiny fingers lay still on the blanket. The doctors had warned him, without an emergency surgery, her heart would stop. The operation cost an astronomical amount, more than Jacob could earn in a lifetime. He worked 2 jobs, but it was barely enough to cover food and rent. Time was running out and he had no solution. One evening, he sat in the hospital corridor when a stranger in an expensive suit sat beside him. The man seemed calm, but his eyes gleamed with cold determination. "Do you want to save your daughter?" the stranger asked, as if he knew all of Jacob's darkest secrets. "Who are you?" Jacob raised his head, instantly on guard. "That doesn't matter. I can give you a chance. But it'll cost you." The stranger handed him a card that read "Survival Game" and explained the conditions. Jacob would become the target of 7 hunters. He had to survive for 24 hours. For every hour he stayed alive, a large sum of money would be deposited into his account. But if he was killed, all the accumulated funds would be lost. "That's tens of thousands of dollars per hour," the stranger added with a smile. "You'll have a chance to save your daughter. But there are rules, and you must follow them." The rules were simple but deadly. 1. Only Jacob could participate. No one was allowed to help him. 2. He had to keep moving at least 2 kilometers every hour. 3. The hunters were mercenaries. Each offered a bounty for his death. They had already started tracking him. 4. His location would be revealed to all hunters every 6 hours. 5. The game was limited to the state. Leaving the state would result in immediate termination. 6. Any attempt to surrender or cheat meant automatic failure. Jacob listened silently, gripping the card tightly. The terms were insane, but it was his only shot at raising the money he needed. He returned to Sophie's room, ran a hand through her fine hair, and exhaled quietly. By tomorrow morning, the surgery would be meaningless. His heart ached. Refusing this game meant losing her forever. At 4 a.m., Jacob stood up, pulled out his phone, and dialed the number on the card. "I'm in," he said after a long pause. "Excellent," the voice on the other end replied. "Remember, every minute counts. The game begins at noon." At exactly 12 p.m., Jacob received a message. "The game has started. You are in the state of Oregon. Every second matters." The first notification came through, $5,000 for the first hour. He felt a brief wave of relief, but fear quickly consumed him. 24 hours of hell awaited him. He stepped out of the hospital, breathing in the crisp autumn air. His watch was already ticking. Somewhere in the city, 7 hunters had begun their pursuit. Jacob burst out of the hospital into the night sky, thick clouds hanging low. A light drizzle mixed with cold wind, biting into his skin. The street felt eerily quiet, so quiet that even his own breathing sounded suspiciously loud. He scanned the parking lot, looking for any movement, but saw no one. Yet, 12:07. The first $5,000 had already landed in his account. The money arrived like a reminder he couldn't stop. Just half an hour in, and it already felt like a sniper's sights were locked on him. His chest tightened with the ominous sense that disaster was only a heartbeat away. Jacob pulled his jacket collar higher and slipped into a nearby alley, trying to melt into the shadows. Every footstep echoed deep in his chest. There was something lurking behind him. Not just fear, but the unsettling sense that someone was already watching, toying with him like a cat with a mouse. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Hands trembling, he pulled it out and saw a new message. "The first hunter is close. Trust nothing familiar." Jacob froze. How did they know where he was already? And what did that message mean? Trust nothing familiar. A wave of anxiety surged through him, pulsing in his skull like a warning he couldn't fully grasp. Then he heard it. A soft, rhythmic ticking, like an old clock. The sound was coming from beneath the hood of a nearby car. Jacob stopped in his tracks, peering into the darkness. No one was visible inside the vehicle, but the engine was still warm. Someone had been here recently. Maybe they still were. Suddenly, the rear door of the car creaked open, and something shifted inside. Jacob's hand shot to his pocket, gripping his keys tight, clutching them like a makeshift weapon. There was no time to think. He bolted deeper into the alley, running from the unknown threat. But a voice stopped him cold. "We see you, Jacob." His heart lurched. The voice came from his phone. Someone had hacked into his device. The screen lit up with another message. "You won't survive this. It's only a matter of time." Panicking, Jacob hurled the phone against the wall, shattering it into pieces. But the feeling of being hunted only grew stronger. It was as if the very night was pressing in, thickening around him, waiting to suffocate him. A metallic clink echoed behind him. Jacob whirled around and saw a figure. A man in a mask painted with unblinking eyes that seemed to follow him wherever he moved. The hunter held a long knife in his hand. Jacob sprinted, not caring where he was going, only knowing he needed to get away from that relentless gaze. He tore through the maze of narrow streets, the pounding footsteps behind him growing louder. This wasn't a chase for capture. They weren't in a hurry. They were playing with him, teasing, dragging out the fear. This was a game he couldn't win, only endure. Jacob stumbled into an old underground passage, descending into the darkness. The damp walls smelled of mildew, and the flickering lights sputtered like dying flames. He ran deeper into the tunnel, struggling to catch his breath. When he heard it, the sound of footsteps closing in from both directions. He was trapped. "You know it's only a matter of time, right?" A warm, almost friendly voice called out from the shadows. Jacob turned and saw another hunter, a tall man in a hat, standing just a few feet away. In his hand, he held a photograph. It was of Jacob, taken mere minutes ago when he had left the hospital. They had been tracking him from the very start. "Let's make a deal, Jacob," the hunter said, stepping closer. "You could end this right now. Let us finish it quickly." Jacob grabbed an empty bottle from the ground and smashed it against the wall, gripping the jagged edge like a weapon. He pressed his back to the wall, fighting the rising panic. The hunter tilted his head with mild curiosity, as if amused by the futile gesture. "You still think this is a game you can win?" The hunter chuckled, voice rough like gravel. "Most people don't make it past the 5th hour." Jacob didn't wait for another word. He charged forward, forcing his way between the hunters. One of them swung his blade, missing by a fraction of a second. Jacob burst out of the tunnel like a man escaping from a snare and plunged back into the night. His heart pounded so hard it felt like it might explode. His whole body shook with fear and exhaustion, but he kept running. Forward. Always forward. Survive. He glanced at the shattered phone in his pocket. Somehow, the screen was still glowing. 1:00. You made it through 1 hour. But they're coming for you. Asterisk asterisk. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. The longer the game went on, the more ruthless the hunters would become. And the worst part? They weren't in a rush to kill him. They were savoring every moment. 23 hours remained. And with every passing minute, those hours grew longer than a lifetime. It was already dark, and night was closing in. Jacob shoved the motel door open and dashed inside, as if fleeing from the very air outside. He slammed the door shut behind him and locked every latch, even wedging a chair under the handle. The light in the room was dim, barely illuminating the old wallpaper, cracked at the seams. The bed was made, but it looked like someone had laid on it earlier and hastily pulled the blanket back over it. Jacob was breathing heavily. He checked his phone. Another payment had come through. The money was flowing in. But what now? He had to hold out for another 16 hours. Yet with every passing moment, he felt his mind cracking, like thin glass under pressure. His gaze fell on the door leading to the adjoining room. It was slightly ajar, and a thin wisp of gray smoke was curling out. At first, Jacob thought it was steam from a vent or pipe, but the smoke carried an unsettling smell, like something organic, smoldering, and rotten. The smoke coiled and slithered along the floor, wrapping around his legs like serpents. Jacob froze, realizing that this smoke wasn't ordinary. It was deliberate. He tried to back away, but the air grew colder, like a trap slowly tightening around him. Suddenly, a familiar, soft voice drifted from the adjoining room. "Daddy, it's me, Sophie. Open up. I'm here. I'm alive. I've come for you." His heart stopped. That couldn't be real. Sophie was in the hospital, he knew that. There was no way anyone could have brought her here. But the voice, it was so familiar, so genuine. It sent chills deep into his bones. "Daddy, it's dark in here. They promised I could come back if you let me in. Open the door, Daddy." Jacob's hand hovered near the door handle, trembling. But a voice in his mind screamed, "Asterisk, don't do it. It's a trap." Asterisk, he jerked his hand back just in time. A moment later, the soft voice transformed into a low, sinister whisper that morphed into eerie laughter, sending shivers down his spine. "Open the door. If you don't, she'll die. Just like you will." Jacob stumbled backward, grabbing his gun and aiming it at the door. The smoke thickened, and from within it, shapes began to emerge. Slender hands, the outline of a head, long hair. It all came together to form the faint figure of Sophie, standing just behind the door, pale with empty eyes. "You're running out of time, Daddy. I can't wait much longer." Jacob stood frozen in place. He knew it wasn't her, but something deep inside him wouldn't let him look away. He saw Sophie standing on the edge between life and death, and it was tearing him apart. A loud knock. He jolted, pointing the gun toward the door. Suddenly, it burst open with a violent force, and a hunter wearing a mask charged through, knife in hand. Jacob fired. The bullet ricocheted off the wall, but he kept shooting over and over until the hunter collapsed, disappearing into the swirling smoke that filled the room. His phone buzzed on the table. Jacob leaned over, his hands shaking, and glanced at the screen. A message flashed. "The game is just beginning. 15 hours have already passed." He dropped the phone like it was a venomous snake and exhaled loudly. The air in the room felt heavier, as if the sky was collapsing and pressing down on his chest. From beyond the door, faint laughter echoed again. This time, coming from all directions. He could no longer trust his senses. He was being hunted, not just by those outside, but by the game itself, which was slowly seeping into his mind, shattering reality into fragments. He wasn't sure anymore where the real danger lay, outside or within himself. A wave of dizziness hit him, and Jacob's knees gave out. He collapsed to the floor, consciousness slipping away. Jacob took a sharp breath, his eyelids lifting to reveal the dim light overhead. He lay sprawled on the floor of a dingy motel room, his entire body convulsing in painful spasms. The air still hung heavy with the faint haze of smoke, mixing with the smell of mold and something rotten. He had been unconscious for an hour. He was lucky. One of the hunters could have found and killed him, but that hadn't happened. Asterisk, asterisk. Checking his phone, Jacob saw another payment hit his account, a reminder that the game was still on. But there were only 13 hours left, and any sense of safety felt like a mirage. Fighting dizziness and fear, Jacob forced himself to leave the motel. He desperately needed shelter and a moment to think about his next move. That's when he spotted an old Catholic church across the street. The building looked abandoned, but it gave off a strange sense of peace. It might be the only place where he could rest for a moment and hide. The church door creaked open, releasing the soft glow of candlelight. The silence inside was eerie, but Jacob didn't care. He hoped the hunters wouldn't dare violate the sanctity of the place. "Please, help me. I need shelter," he rasped, staggering toward the altar. From the shadows emerged a priest, a tall man in a black cassock with a white beard. He placed a heavy hand on Jacob's shoulder, his gaze cold and unsettling. "You'll find peace here, son. Sit and rest," the priest said softly. Jacob collapsed onto a pew, breathless and drained. For the first time in hours, he allowed himself to relax, if only a little. "They're after me. I don't know what to do. Please, Father, help me," he murmured, barely holding on to consciousness. The priest silently lit a candle before an icon, the flame flickering in the faint draft. The scent of burning wick filled the air, and something in the priest's expression was off. "Sinners often believe sanctuary will save them," the priest whispered. "But rules are rules, son, and I always follow the rules." Jacob's heart turned cold. From under his cassock, the priest suddenly pulled out a large, sharpened hunting knife. What are you doing?" Jacob stammered, trying to back away. "You thought you could run from this? You walked right into it," the priest said, taking a step closer. The knife slashed into Jacob's leg, ripping through fabric and muscle. A wave of agony shot through him, and he cried out, collapsing to the floor. Blood soaked through his jeans, pooling beneath him. "You won't get far now," the priest said calmly, watching Jacob writhe in pain. "But we have time, lots of time." Terror and desperation flooded Jacob as he realized he'd been set up. The priest was one of the hunters. "You're lucky you're still alive." But not for long. With every ounce of strength he had left, Jacob lunged forward, knocking over a pew and toppling candles in a flurry of chaos. The priest chased him, but despite the searing pain in his leg, Jacob was faster. He spotted a door behind the altar and bolted through it. A dark, twisting corridor stretched before him like a labyrinth. His ragged breath echoed off the damp stone walls. The priest's footsteps thundered close behind, each one a hammer blow in Jacob's mind, mixing with the frantic pounding of his heart. "You won't escape, Jacob. They always find people like you." Jacob burst into a vast underground chamber. Crosses and iron hooks dangled from the walls, and ropes hung loosely from above. Dark stains marked the stone floor. "A perfect place for confession, isn't it?" The priest's mocking voice echoed from the doorway. Pain pulsed through Jacob's leg in unbearable waves, but he couldn't stop now. He spotted a small hole in the wall and crawled toward it, every movement a struggle. The priest lunged, trying to grab Jacob's leg, but he tore free and squeezed through the narrow opening. Crawling through the tight tunnel, he emerged on the other side, out into the church's graveyard. Cold rain poured from the sky, drenching Jacob as exhaustion and pain threatened to overwhelm him. He glanced back and saw her. Amid the crooked gravestones stood Sophie, her silhouette barely visible through the rain. "Daddy, you won't make it," she whispered, her voice threading through the storm. Jacob blinked, but Sophie's image vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Her voice echoed in his mind. "You won't make it." The priest's footsteps rushed closer, and Jacob forced himself to move, limping across the cemetery. He knew only one thing for certain: the game wasn't over yet. Jacob breathes heavily, his injured leg burning with pain, but he forces himself to keep moving. Blood from the wound leaves a trail on the asphalt. The streets are empty, as if after an apocalypse, and even the wind feels too quiet. There's exactly 1 hour left until the game ends, but each minute drags like an eternity. He glances back. The hunters are closing in. Asterisk, asterisk. Suddenly, a gunshot. A bullet whizzes past his ear, forcing him to dive behind the nearest car. His heart pounds in his chest, and his hands tremble, but there's no time for fear. He knows, if he slows down or makes a wrong move, it's over. Asterisk, asterisk. From around the corner, one of the hunters appears, moving with the confidence of a predator sensing its prey. Jacob scans his surroundings for an escape route and spots the window of an abandoned store. Summoning every ounce of strength, he hurls himself toward it. The glass shatters as his body crashes through, adding fresh cuts to his wounds. But he's up again. 45 minutes left. Asterisk, asterisk. The streets become a maze, with hunters blocking every exit. But Jacob keeps pushing forward, ignoring the pain and fear. His mind stops strategizing, instinct takes over. One hunter ambushes him in an alley, but with a surge of adrenaline, Jacob grabs a piece of rebar and strikes before the hunter can react. It's the closest he's been to death, but he can't afford to stop. 30 minutes left. Asterisk, asterisk. On another street, he notices piles of trash and broken fences, as if someone passed through recently. Maybe the hunters are toying with him, leaving signs to make him feel trapped. A rustle behind him sends a chill through his spine. They're getting closer. Asterisk, asterisk. Finally, Jacob reaches the edge of town and sees the river. Across the water is the state border, where he'll be safe. But the game's rules forbid him from crossing. He stands there, panting, cold sweat on his back. 15 minutes left. Asterisk, asterisk. Suddenly, 3 hunters emerge from the shadows. Their eyes are cold, and their movements are precise and calm. They know he's at the edge of exhaustion. One of them smirks. "Come on, Jacob, just a little more. Or are you ready to give up?" In response, Jacob charges forward like a cornered animal, dodging bullets. One bullet ricochets off a tree, grazing his arm, but he keeps running even as his legs threaten to give out. 10 minutes left. He bursts through the door of a gas station and locks it behind him. Voices from outside confirm. The hunters won't stop. Asterisk, asterisk. Jacob collapses on the floor, desperately trying to stop the bleeding, trembling from the pain. He watches as the minutes tick away on his phone. 1 minute, 30 seconds. Finally, the alarm sounds. The game is over. He survived. Asterisk, asterisk. Exhausted and battered, Jacob makes his way to the hospital. With each step, he feels the weight on his shoulders begin to lift. He won. The prize money is now in his account. He's almost at Sophie's room, ready to see her again. Asterisk, asterisk. But when he enters, the room is silent. A doctor stands by her bed, his expression heavy with sorrow. "I'm sorry," the doctor says softly. "She passed a few minutes ago." Jacob stands frozen, paralyzed. He sees her pale, peaceful face and her folded hands. His daughter is gone, and he never got to say goodbye. His phone slips from his hand and shatters on the floor. Asterisk, asterisk. The money has been deposited. The prize he fought to win over the past 24 hours glows on the screen, but it no longer matters. Sophie is gone, and the money meant to save her is now a burden he'll never escape. Asterisk, asterisk. Jacob sinks to his knees beside her bed, feeling hollow inside. All the sacrifices, the pain, the violence, it was all for nothing. Now he and his wife are left alone, with more money than they could ever spend, but nothing that truly matters. Sophie is gone. Asterisk, asterisk. Jacob pulls his wife close, and they weep together, their sobs filling the sterile hospital room. The grief becomes unbearable. And remember, sometimes winning can become the biggest loss of your life. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments. Would you play a game like this?